Jared is getting the audio set up. Oh, hey, Chris.
Can you hear us?
I can hear you.
Cool.
All right. I just joined via Zoom in case we want to share something. Jen, I'll share my screen. Or unless Chris, you want to share your screen, that's fine. We can do that later. But all right, let's see. It's 7:01. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We do not have do we have 1 7? Yeah, we're good. All right. Well, not that we're making decisions or anything, but we're gonna go through the boards with who we have. All right, so we have the agenda, which was one thing added. So we're going to talk a little bit about the comms plan communications about the public forum on the 15th before we dive into. We'll turn over to Chris. Chris, thank you for joining us tonight. Welcome back from travel. I hope that you're reacclimating. And then we're going to spend the bulk of. I would like to spend the vast majority of the time going through the boards. And before we do that, I want to make sure Chris has some time to kind of align with his expectations and our expectations, make sure we're getting the same things out of the meeting, the public forum. So yeah, so first things first, let's stand and do the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, so communications update. So 10:15 is the new dates. I know we kind of called an audible after our last zoning meeting based on Chris's availability and room availability and the fact that last zoning meeting or our last meeting we spent, I don't know, over 90 minutes, almost 2 hours going through the boards. I envisioned something like that tonight because we've got to grind through this. So we made the decision to punt for one more session. So that's how we arrived on the 15th. So in terms of the communications plan, thank you to Marilyn and Pete for taking the signs up and distributing them.
Here's a list of the signs.
Oh, did you? Where you put them up?
I checked those off.
Very thorough.
I know Peter was putting signs out.
Any in the north end?
Oh,
yeah.
Oh yeah, right here, Dunkin' Donuts.
Oh, perfect.
Well, that one I did, but here's the north end. If you want to
Perfect.
look at that,
can look at
anybody
it.
wants to see it, it's right here. I'll just leave it on the table and.
All right, so Darvin, you've reached out to your peeps to get the word out. Are they gonna put another bulletin
board, social media blast, and then farmers market this Saturday. Flyers are going.
Awesome.
And we could do the way we were car show because it's on the
Yeah.
13th.
I was thinking the same thing.
Yeah, I saw the date and I was like, oh yeah, that works.
Mention that too, as well too.
Yes.
So it will be a combination of flyers at the farmers market and car show.
Yeah, I gave the farmers market the flyers, but I don't know if they'll get passed over to the next person. Okay, and do we have both bulletin boards of flyer on there? The one on Front Street and the one on Milton Avenue next to Coffee Planet?
Gotcha. Another one it's gonna do on Front Street, but I'll verify with her.
Okay.
On the Milton Ave one.
Excellent. And let's see, anything else? Mr. Mayor, is there anything been posted to the mayor's page yet on
A week for one,
1 week out? Okay, thank you.
We were on the community board last week.
Perfect.
It went to Saratoga today and hopefully it will show up for 2 issues, but there's no guarantee.
Yeah.
Also started handing out to neighbors and business people that I know.
Yeah, I've done that
flyers.
as well.
And I'd encourage anybody else, if you want to do that, I have a few
Okay,
extra
copies.
copies.
I have some in my car and in my house, just in case.
What day is the car show?
The 13th,
13th, that's
I don't know what day of the weekend that is, but.
right.
Okay.
I plan on being there and I will hand out as many flyers as possible. Okay, any other items on the communications front that we should talk about now that we haven't covered in general? Any other areas or avenues of awareness?
Just that people, if you have a social media
Yeah.
page, put it on your page. I can send you a JPEG of the sign. And Jen did update the picture on the village webpage.
And I put it on both my Instagram and Facebook, and I'm gonna re-up it with a new one next week.
Perfect. Perfect.
I don't know how many people follow me, but
That's okay. It's okay. I would recommend getting on camera right here, Margaret. Maybe the more people would follow you.
it's,
Okay. All right. Anything else before we move on and turn it over to Chris?
Yeah, meeting logistics. When I had to go back here to look at multiple dates, extension reminded me that we are responsible for our own room setup
Yeah.
and actual returning of the original setup
That's
that
fine.
they have here. So that just means everybody's got to help with the chairs because
Yeah,
they're all
fine.
there on the carts, and we'll leave the tables here because it just doesn't make sense to
No, I'm
move
not
a
too
lot
worried
of
about it.
tables.
I think
Good.
we'll ask Chris if he has easels or things like that, but ultimately he's got the manpower. We can sort the room out. We can make space however he wants to set up. So I'm not too worried about that, provided we have the space secured. I think
Yeah. And that's
not
new microphone that they just got,
perfect.
and we should be good.
Good. And I assume, so we probably wanna shoot to be here 6:30 for.
Yeah.
For setup a
Yeah.
bit, but
Sure.
yeah.
I think we'll have plenty of manpower. Chris reminded us that we don't need everybody here but we need just enough to help him facilitate conversations and help narrate the boards and man the boards if anybody has questions on them. Okay. Chris,
So,
sir.
just on that one
take
last
it
logistics
away.
point of view, when would I be able to access the room? Because I would like more than a half hour to make sure I have enough time to set everything up. I'd prefer to have at least an hour if that's possible.
That shouldn't be a problem.
Okay. Great, thank you. And yes, man, I will bring
I'll be-
the easels.
Yep, I'll happy to meet you here or ahead of time, however you want, whenever you come into town, I can meet you to help you out.
Okay, great.
All right, excellent. So next one here are the revised boards. So Chris, the rest of the time is with you. I know that unfortunately you missed last meeting. However, the guidance you gave us was rather robust and very appreciative. So it was like we basically pulled up a board and sorry, I'm over here. We pulled up a board and basically read out what you put for each board, and then that kind of helped guide the conversation. And then in turn, we handed you feedback for each one. So that's basically where the conversation's at. So from there, I've noticed you saw which way we were going with some of these boards. And so let's start there with your observations and like what you want to get out of it, and want to be very clear of what our perspective is, what we should get out of it versus what we approach the public already with the comprehensive plan.
Sure. And I don't know, do people have the boards or copies of them in front of them? If not,
Yep.
I wonder, Matt, it might be easier if you don't mind
Yeah.
sharing the screen, just because I can't look at the boards and the everyone.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Just give me 1 second. Which one would you like me to bring up?
the
Just
draft
the
board
main-
that I sent yesterday.
Well, yeah, okay, all right. So I'll queue up all three.
Well, so there were two files that were the comments, the PDFs from Maryland, but I'm referring to the one that I provided yesterday, which was a file that was from a link.
Oh, shoot,
Okay.
I forgot to click the view.
All right, let me see if I can make this fit a little bit. Oh, it's definitely a delay here. All right, so I think this is the best I can do here, Chris. So I can kind of just man the up and down button here
Okay.
to make it.
That's fine. So I guess just to, thank you both to Marilyn and to you, Matt, for compiling kind of all the comments. So I've gone through and I kind of did the same process where I made the changes, but then also sent another, I guess, fairly robust email just addressing basically point by point, whether, you know, in some cases it was very straightforward, in other cases I made the change, but I just wanted to raise a couple of things just for consideration, just so people are aware, if they were sort of different from what I was expecting, or what I've done before. And then there are some situations where, at least as of now, I haven't been able, or I haven't made the change, and I explained sort of why. So if it's, you know, my hope, Matt, in terms of the expectation is we're not far off at this point. I mean, I would think after all of the comments from last time that these are pretty, this I'm hoping will go pretty quickly. But I guess we'll see where we get. So the first page, there was really no comments. It was just to add some additional street names. So I've done that. So I think you can go to the next board.
Let me get my maps to work here so I don't lose my mind. All right, there we go.
Okay, and you can scroll down to the bottom half of this one because there was no comments related to the top. And actually there were no comments related to this either. So this board was, let's just say, all set, and we can just keep moving along.
Yeah, you do have a typo under this paragraph, the relationship to comp plan.
Okay.
If you go down to the second sentence, the beginning of the third.
Yeah, thank you for catching that. Yeah.
And then figure out what to do with the other part of the parenthesis.
Yeah, thank you. And actually, I should add that up the top, there was the comment about adding the historic district, so I did put that in. So, but so I didn't make any change, but it was straightforward. So I think you can go to the next page then. Okay, so here we have the future zoning map. So the comments here, some of them were you know, straightforward, like let's adjust the colors, and we can continue to adjust them, obviously. So I've taken one attempt at that and added the street names as requested. The main,
High Street is,
I'm sorry.
West High Street is on the wrong street.
Oh,
So that has to be moved up to
Yeah.
the north to that street.
thank you. So I'll make that change. One of the comments was to put back in the adult use district. So I've done that because that was the request. I don't know if this is something that the ZAC sort of discussed, that that's how you want to treat this, and that's why we're having this proposal. You know,
So
as I said before,
can
you
you
don't need.
Inform us. Can you help inform us, Chris?
Yeah.
Our understanding is that it is a mandate from the state.
I will try to explain again. It's not a mandate from the state. There's a federal law that's been settled by the Supreme Court that you have to allow adult uses somewhere within the village. That does
Okay.
not mean you have to have an adult use district. So the district is a zoning that you have that says that's where that goes. The way is treated sometimes in other communities is sometimes it's within another district. So I've used the example that it is often within an industrial district, because often those are sort of located sort of hidden away. I know that's not necessarily the case in Boston Spa, but that's one example. The other option is, you know, it's kind of smack in within the downtown district. It could still be in that location, but it could be an optional overlay district. And that means that if somebody wanted on that parcel to build according to the downtown, like a mixed use commercial type of development, they could do that. They wouldn't be sort of hamstrung to do an adult use.
Which is the case right now, right? That is the case of what we have right now, right? It's not so that area is still zoned the same as the rest of the central business district. It's just also the space that is the
Correct.
adult use district.
Yeah.
Okay, that's not clear from the overlay district I'm sorry, from your current zoning map that it's an overlay district. My impression was that it is the base zoning. So if it is that way, then yes, that seems like a logical way to do it in the future.
Apologies if I'm wrong there. I thought that was the case, but.
Okay. All right, so from my understanding is this adult use district was used so we could have control over where in the village this use was allowed. I think that's probably the main requirement that we would continue to desire going forward. However that could be implemented, I think is where we're at.
Yeah, and I think that's it's very clear that you wouldn't want to allow adult uses anywhere. You definitely want to control it to a very discrete area. So if that area where it currently is the correct area, that's fine.
Okay. But
It's
the
like-
mechanism for having a separate district for that, does that still
It's still valid.
comport with how you're looking at implementing adult uses?
If I did not realize that there's an underlying CBD currently that you can do there. If that is the case, then I think how you have
No,
it.
it sounds like I'm about that.
I don't think
Oh, okay, sorry, it was hard to hear that. So so if I had to give a recommendation and you think that area is the area you want it to be, what I would do is make it an overlay district. And that means that you can then do the underlying instead of that. And I think that would be I would guess would be the hope for that somebody would develop not an adult use there, but something that's more conducive to the downtown uses.
Okay,
And I
Chris,
can
I would just like-
change the map to reflect that if this group agrees with that, or I can just hold it off for now.
Chris, this is Anna. Just, you keep mentioning the industrial use, so other than that's across the street from me, and I highly do not want that. It is also right across the street from the village pool and a park.
Yeah.
So we do not want we would not want the adult use in the industrial district in that area.
Yeah,
I mean, it would also be a problem because we have definitions for how far away it can be from those things, so we
Right.
can't put. The only place that it can be, we would probably not be within
Right.
the law for
regulations.
what we have to allow if we put it somewhere where it can't possibly be.
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, and that's a pretty isolated part of the village. It's currently in an area that's,
it's pretty isolated.
Yeah, so it sounds like the location it currently is okay. Does this group want it to remain as it is, like that's all you can do there, or do you want it to be the format of being an optional overlay district, or somebody could do the
Overlay.
Yeah.
I'd say overlay.
Yeah, that would be more incentive to do other things other than just that.
Yeah.
I think that's what we would look.
I will make that change.
I will dissent from that because I don't know how that overlay would actually work.
Okay, what do you mean by that?
So, well, explain what the extent of the overlay would be. Would
Okay,
it extend
We're like
beyond
central
its,
business district.
would, so would,
it would
would-
extend, it'd be the boundaries of the overlay district would be exactly what the current adult use district is. It would
okay,
not
and the
be
current
expanded.
adult use district is that single owner's property. Okay, then I'm okay with that.
Yes, it would, yes, the intent would not be to change the boundaries. It would just be to actually incentivize people not to do adult uses by providing a different option.
Thank you for explaining that.
Sure. Okay, my only other, and I tried to soften the language a little bit on this one, but the question of does the zoning boundaries, does it reflect the vision map? I mean, it's just, we can keep it. I think it's kind of a tough question for the general public to sort of to answer, other than saying, well, does it match or does it not match the sort of what was done on that vision map? The vision map is just that, it's a vision for the future. It doesn't mean that zoning boundaries are perfectly aligned to that. And that's sort of where I was kind of a little hesitant to ask that question in that way. But I think it's fine to keep. I'm just raising that.
Yeah, Chris, I think one of the reactions we may have from the community is the fact that we no longer have that parks/open space designation that we had on the previous
Sure, and that's
version.
exactly, yep. That's a great example of why I wouldn't ask this question, because that is a land use thing, that park, you don't usually have a parks zoning district. I have seen it, but it's not that common. It doesn't mean that the parks are going away. That's just, it's a separate issue. You have these parks that are there. And that is the land use, now and in the future. The zoning is what the district is, though, that's separate.
So if
Well, it
I
might
could
give
play
the
that back.
wrong impression of a park, a current village park now shaded as residential. So you will get questions from the community about that.
Yeah. It's a
But
big deal.
I mean, if you need examples of other communities that have actually incorporated open space parks into their zoning, I'm sure we can get those
Yeah,
from
it's
nearby
not-
communities in New York.
We don't get any questions now about it, so I wouldn't, it's not something that we need.
Let me
to
see if I
worry
can play this back. So this right here, there's two mechanisms at play. One is use and one is districts. This diagram here is to represent the districts, not necessarily the land use mechanism, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so let's stick with just districts. And maybe we can make it clear that land use is a different, it's a separate mechanism, separate topic. I don't know if we want to even broach that topic of uses,
Mm,
but
Yeah, that was part of my concern of saying, does this reflect land use vision map? Because that it could give that wrong impression to say like the parks are going away. But that
Yeah,
doesn't
you're
mean
you're
a
conflating
zoning district
mechanisms,
of
yeah.
parks. That's just not standard to do that. You could do that, I suppose.
Well, the perception is you're giving those areas that are traditionally open space / parks a higher use, which
Well,
is
but they're
equating
not.
to residential. So
Right.
that's what's perception is going to surface, and we'll see how it
Well,
all turns out.
And that's why I would compare it to your existing zoning map. If you go up to the first
yeah,
page,
exactly.
you
Been there since 1994.
so go up, yeah, so look, it's all yellow. It's not, you don't have a parks district, but that, like I said, that's just not a standard thing to do.
Exactly.
And that's why that's separate from what the actual land use is.
I would like to go with your recommendation, just keep it standard,
I agree.
standard approach.
What, Chris, can I ask when, you mentioned the adult district / possible transition zone. When will we talk about what areas will be transition zones per se?
So that you're
Overlay
referring to that kind
districts,
of greenish.
overlay districts.
So there's, I think it's the next
Yeah,
page
the
or
next
two
board
pages.
or the
that-
next
that
one
was
after
of the
at 2
questions.
boards, I think.
Okay,
Yeah,
Before we move on from that board, do we want them to remove the question about do the boundaries and districts reflect what future land use vision map? Is that something the Zach would agree on? So I think, Chris, that's kind of your recommendation, right? That question might not be necessary here.
oh,
correct.
And I mean, I'm not sure it's an unnecessary question either. I'd be okay excluding that.
I would be as well.
yeah, I agree, Jared.
I just want to make sure we're giving Chris the right guidance here if we're
Yeah.
asking for any further updates.
I think what we can do here is make a blurb here, just, or a note down below. Something about uses. This is reflecting the districts, not the land use within said districts. So your recommendation is to remove this question? Is that what you're asking us?
I think it will be clearer to remove that question, and it sounds like from what I just heard, others agree. I don't think this is so critical that if people want to keep it in, that's fine. I'm just again raising some concerns.
Any questions, or any concern with keeping it in from us?
No.
If not, we take it out, Chris, and we can move on.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so I think we can go to the next page then. Okay, so again, I think, this is okay to keep it this way. I made, some of the changes, that were including, so there were a number of text changes, so I've made those. This is essentially asking what I would consider a fairly different question than the iteration I provided. And so I'm always happy to try new things, and this could be great. My concern is we're asking this very open-ended thing where we're essentially saying, here's these buildings that you probably really like that are in your downtown. Now tell us exactly what you like about them. And I think that might be a hard question for the average members of the public to answer beyond things that I think are going to be fairly obvious, like people saying, this feels like Boston Spa, or this is, traditional architecture. This is 2 stories or 3 stories, whatever the case may be. Maybe I'm wrong
So
and
to-
maybe other stuff. Sorry.
So to be fair, Chris, the original information that was shared with you did a comparison
Right.
with a neighboring community,
Yeah.
which had those architectural features you were trying to highlight. And I only mention that because it was a great example of a local community interpreting mixed use, trying to get architectural faux character into their quote unquote downtown with retail on the bottom. By the way, all of that retail was all empty. And so it was a comparison.
Yep. I'm about to address that.
And the feedback box did ask, are any characteristics missing?
Yep.
So,
So I think that's so there's 2 parts. I think if you want me to add another, I'd have to add a whole nother board because it's not going to fit on this board. I personally don't know if it's the best idea to kind of have a direct comparison to a neighboring community. In my mind, it sort of kind of pits things unnecessarily. I still think regardless, people are going to have a hard time sort of eliciting what exactly is wrong with one versus the other, versus what we like with the other one. But my thought,
I think they'll know right away.
Yeah, I think they'll know that really large building that's 5
The empty
stories,
store
because nobody's going to want a huge 5-story building. I guess I don't know what we're going to learn from that, because people are going to say they don't like it, and whether they can articulate it or not, we know enough to be able to zone, create the zoning regulations that are going to not have that kind of result. So
Yeah.
I'll do it. I'll add one more board if that's what the group wants. Like I said, I'm raising the thing. My alternative suggestion on that, Marilyn, was that I would show those pictures during the slide presentation. And so I would kind of sort of say, like, at a sort of fundamental level, this seems like this matches what people say they want, mixed use, but you probably don't like this. And what are some of the things that make this not reflect sort of what we would want? So I'd kind of prime the pump that way in the presentation, and then they would have these pictures to kind of decide what they do like.
Yeah, it's good to prime the pump. I'm all for that. The thing that I didn't share with you was the actual uses within those buildings. And it ranged everything from the bank, which I think we all know, to a deli with apartments above, a barber shop with an apartment in the back, an architect, a salon, human services, a recreational area for disability services, a restaurant, residences above, a gluten-free baker, clothing stores, and a developer.
That's fine, Roland. We don't need to know every single use, to be honest. I think if you want me to add another board and put that comparison in, I will.
No, it's
I
what
would
everybody else.
defer to you, Chris, on you do this. Like I would prefer to hear your expertise on what resonates with the public. We're here to kind of give you the local flavor and what we think the public want. But this is your show, so I personally, I'm not going to speak for everybody, but I like just keeping it a slide
Yeah.
and let you kind of, prime the pump as you will.
Yeah,
Are we hearing, is that?
Let him run the show.
I think this version of the board is a huge improvement over what we got last time. And I still am a little skeptical that we'll get really detailed, useful information that will actually go into what is written. But I think this is much farther along than what was there before. I think it's a subject that's just going to be hard to get really good information.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay.
but I do
Alright.
think showing in Malta, because if this is what mixed use on the bottom, apartments on top look like, people are
Yeah,
gonna
that is
equate
good.
that.
That's a good point. So yeah, so Chris, little local flavor here. The next adjacent town of Malta, it's right along the Northway, right along 87. And they are attempting to, what I would say, my words, force a downtown that's not really a downtown.
Recreate a downtown.
And they're using it by those type of buildings, so.
Yeah.
A lot of people, a lot of residents have to drive by that every day, so. It's a stark contrast in our daily lives. It's creeping in on all sides.
Yeah,
And so everybody is rather cognizant, so I think it makes sense to address that during your slide deck, your
Yeah.
presentation.
To clarify,
I'd agree.
Chris,
I like it
is
included in
that
the
the
presentation.
neighboring, the photos that Marilyn had sent, is that Malta?
yes,
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
you just need to turn your back and find, 6 different faux architectural styles in a quote unquote mixed use area, retail and residential side by side. So,
Chris, anything
We-
else on this board?
I mean, I don't, given that, we could do 2 boards and maybe people can, maybe it is helpful to see the comparison and let them, if they can comment on it, great. I can still address it in the slide to a degree and maybe people will be able to sort of say, hey, what is it about this building?
You got this, Chris. We'll leave it to you.
So maybe I'll let me chew on that a little bit and we'll I'll update it accordingly.
Sounds good.
Okay, you can go to the next page then. So again, there were a lot of text edits, so I've made all the text edits. That just meant though that there's less room for some of the visuals. If you go to the bottom half, I think that one of the thoughts was showing what this is today and then having a diagram or a picture that shows lots of future landscaping as a comparison. I'm happy to do that. I think I would need the village to give me that example that you're thinking of, because I don't really know exactly what that means. I also think, given how much text we have on this bottom left picture, so this bottom left, as a reminder, this was the most highly rated photo that was associated with the highway business area district as part of the comp plan. We could just get rid of the existing parking lot photo and just this way you would have more space underneath all that block of text next to the next to that brick building for people to put post-it notes, because it's like a lot of questions, but then not a lot of space for answer. So I'm just wondering if we should just delete the top space and then just give it a little more room to breathe.
yeah, I think this is a good change compared to the original board. The problem I had with the original board was that the original board seemed to convey that the problem with the top picture was that there wasn't enough retail development closer to the road, and that would fix the whole issue. When in fact, looking at the rationale for this board, I had to go back to the relationship of the comprehensive plan, which actually provided what the general strategy was, that we needed site planning, design standards, and the whole thing. So if you want to edit that into something smaller, that's great. But the logic on the original board didn't meet up with the intent in the comprehensive plan for the vision for this
Sure.
part of the village.
And that's fine. The
the-
reason that I think I had that sort of what I was calling infill on the site is if you look at this photo today, there's no incentive that somebody would redevelop their property and then add all the extra costs for the landscaping and the site plan, the design, the green infrastructure that you were talking about. So
Well,
without-
redevelopment is happening on that particular parcel. If we just move to the right, you would know
Okay.
more about that, because that's a recent development. And that will bring other development and attract other competitors to that site. I'm just trying to make a point. And it could be the top photo here, or it could be a picture of Ricketts. We'd be saying the same sort of thing. Wherever we have that along highway business, we just have to do better. You have only to drive 1.5 miles north to the southern boundary of Saratoga Springs, and you can see how they took their highway business serious.
Mhm.
And actually, when a development came in, they did a much better job with their code, basically vegetating that impervious surface area or that development. So they're doing a better job than what we have done, in the village. And that was only my point. I didn't have enough room to put in a suggestion that I had gotten about Ricketts being a possible pocket park / charging area, but it would be the same sort of thing. And I would just ask, if your firm has a landscape architect on staff, it would just be so much easier to put in a little diagram there with, some grayscale trees or shrubs or something on the original schematic that you had, and that would have been fine too. So, but that was the thought behind trying to change this, and hopefully, anybody else here will see there's some value to it, but.
It seems to me that if you should post a picture of Ricketts specifically, that people are really gonna focus on, we wanna talk about what to do with Ricketts.
Right.
And I feel like that
Districts.
picture is a better example of, we wanna talk about this area.
That's fine.
Rather
yeah.
than one particular
Yeah.
parcel.
Yeah.
I feel like you might still have that problem a little bit with
Yeah.
this picture, but I think less than with a picture of.
I agree,
Ricketts.
this is more about the
Um,
district than a
yeah.
parcel.
I think that this board is an improvement over the last one, but I still am not really sure what people are going to say to this that isn't just, yeah, that's bad. Like if we look at the questions at the bottom, they're all kinda. Sure, of course I want them to incorporate landscaping. Sure, I want, it just seems like I can't imagine people really saying no or really be expanding on these questions.
Well,
So I think this is,
Yes,
improved. Yeah, sure,
Yeah.
but I feel like we can do more to make sure that we have an objective with this slide, and we're really trying
So what do
to
we have to
get
change?
something specific out of it. And that's a question for Chris, is what do you think is really going to give you something useful for you to write?
Well, we also
Yeah.
have to keep in mind, with the new business opening, what was supposed to be just parking lot is now gonna be used by the new business. And there's already a park and ride there too. So there's, people park
In
there
the Ocean State Park?
in the very front. People park there for the day. Buses park
Yeah,
there.
and none of that's really well signed or
No.
demarcated,
People
and
just do it.
and it could be a little bit better, similar to what the lot looks like at Malta at exit 12,
Mhm.
at the old factory outlets.
Yes, right, some parts
Yeah,
of it.
so,
So to get back to Comron's point, Chris, having very poignant questions tailored to what you can use. Basically, this is all for information you can use to craft and apply to zoning.
Right,
Are
I
these
think.
questions the right questions?
And I 100% agree with Cameron's, note that, they're almost leading questions, because it's gonna be hard. The only person I could see saying, no, I don't want that, would be the
trying to get
landowner who doesn't want to have to deal with it. That being said, it's not necessarily a bad thing. Like, this confirms, it gives like almost like some ammunition to say, we're changing the highway business district to have site plan review and landscape standards. It's very clearly desired by the community. So I think it's okay to keep this as is. I don't think we're gonna get tons of deep, meaty sort of responses to the question. But maybe that's fine because we kind of already know what to do from the comprehensive plan, which is kind of already
Right, so,
saying.
so let's turn this around. Chris, what do you need out of this business district to know better than you have not heard from the comprehensive plan now? Is there, or are you just looking for validation from these questions, or is there something that you didn't get from the comprehensive plan that you need clarification on?
Well, these weren't, to clarify, these were not my questions, right? This is different from what I had. My original previous board, which I understand, folks here think this is an improvement, that's fine. The idea of the original board was to say, here are some specific design elements that you would include in the zoning. Do you agree with these design elements or not? So that it was actually, in that case, a little bit more specific. But like I said, I think what we have here is fine, and we can just ask these questions.
Yeah, the original design elements said a strategy that has been used to maintain similar types of uses while allowing additional development on these large lots. So infill development is not a problem.
I'm not
here.
referring to this
All
part,
for
Marilyn.
it. It's
Marilyn,
just the. I'm sorry.
I'm not
What?
referring to the diagram up top. I think we're
Okay.
past that. I agree with it. I'm talking about this bottom part that sort of tries to take that photo and tries to now parse out. People said that they like this photo, this building for the highway business. What are the pieces that we can actually regulate from that photo? And that was the attempt. All that being said, this is a very small little building, whereas highway business has big box stores. You're not really going to get this kind of building in a highway business district unless it's near the edge and it's kind of like a liner type of building.
Yeah,
don't
it's
see
just to the left of that Ocean State parking lot. You have those buildings, and now you'll have one on the north end.
Sure. So
So
the idea was that if people like the roof lines, the landscaping, buffering, and all that, we were kind of showing that and then saying, do you agree with these elements, that these are the regulations we should have, essentially?
Can I completely contradict myself? Now that we're looking at this in comparison to the previous one, and I'm being reminded of what was in this, I'm not sure about the top part of this slide, but I totally see the value of this part much more. Yeah. I think maybe Chris was right the first time around on this one.
Okay, so I'm going to keep all the text that Marilyn had, because I agree, and I hear you about the whole, let's not talk about infill development, and replace the bottom part with this then. Does the group agree with that?
I see some head shaking, yes.
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 Speak, folks, speak.
All right, then I think we covered this slide then. Thank you, Matt, for referring back to this one.
just so you know, you still do have a missing parenthesis on that board. In the second paragraph, first sentence after parking areas. So put it parenthesis after areas.
Thank you for catching that.
Yep.
Okay, and then this board added a couple questions. So this was where we would talk about the downtown transition, and people could comment on that. There was a note to add a section about adding home businesses. And so I took I tried to put some text, a little blurb together for people to kind of think about with that as well. There was, again, I will put it in, but I don't have it yet, which was about the planned development district and having the people comment on that. I don't think it is a good idea. I don't think the general public is going to have any idea about whether they should have a PDD as a provision or not. I think that's something that this group should, could grapple with. I think you should have a PDD personally. I think it should probably change from the first draft that I had based upon I got some
Well, you
good
said take it
feedback from
out.
some members of both the public and the ZAC. When I say the public, I should say former and current village board members about how to
I don't think it's.
address some concerns.
Yeah, I have incomplete notes, Chris, on my PD, it just says PDD and I must have missed capturing it.
You missed what? I'm sorry.
I missed the note, so hang on, let's get some consensus. What did we say about PDDs on this one?
I had that we add a board that talks about required sizes and places and
I think we did,
Locations.
we discussed
Height.
including a specific questions around PUD in the last meeting.
then on here it says miscellaneous PDD, please make your recommendation, Zach, whether you think it should be included or not, so.
Okay.
I say no, because it's just too early in the process to start firestorm, which that would happen. I just think we have some work to do on that.
Chris, what are your thoughts on asking public about a zoning mechanism?
I-
That hasn't been defined yet.
I think, like I just said, I think it is a bad idea to try and ask that. I think
Okay.
most members of the
I
community
agree-
are
I-
going
I agree
to
with that as well.
barely know and understand what zoning is. They're very much going to conflate zoning with specific development proposals. I think later in the process, after this group helps work on and refine whatever form that this will take, it's going to go to the full public for review, the whole code, of course. And so there might be certain individuals who have some either expertise or some opinions on it. They can ask it, but I would not ask it to the general community at this point.
We have consensus on that.
Okay.
Okay,
That covers all of the comments. I will turn around this next iteration. I don't know if I'll do it tomorrow, but I will do it by Monday and I will send it what I will consider to be finalized to this group again, unless I hear any other
Is-
minor issues.
Is the last board a separate board or part of additional topics?
I hope it's a separate board, because that's a lot, it's already a lot to create.
Yeah. The ADUs.
Yeah, I was keeping this a separate board because it's such a big topic.
I mean, talk about a lot of text, a lot of illustration,
It's great. No, this is actually not as verbose as some other ones.
and I'm not even sure about the questions, so.
I'm sorry. We don't have to include this if we don't want to. I just know that if the village is considering ADUs, whether allowing them or not, ADUs are very much a hot button issue. And so I would not recommend kind of sticking them in at the last sort of 11th hour. I think you would want to get some input at the beginning. What I've tried to do, because there's often misconceptions about them or sort of specific concerns. So at the second half of the slide is some of the common, trying to head up some of the common things that I often hear about. That
You know,
last
we
one
already
is,
have these in the village, right?
yeah, there are some somewhere. and I-
Modifying what's there, it's a separate, this is what
Yeah.
is to be, not what is.
No, we already have them in the village.
We
They've
have-
already
we have
been
an
approved.
We have an ADUs, we have definitions for ADUs in zoning.
No.
Okay, that's
We
what-
have, we
Specific.
have accessory dwelling units that have been authorized,
Like I
right?
said, a separate topic.
But yeah,
Right.
so.
I think this is good to keep in there. We need this in there. Get the
I
input.
agree, yeah.
All right, that covers everything then, Matt. Thank you for everyone for kind of for all the input, and B, I think this was a very productive conversation. So I like I said, I'll make all these
Think
changes.
so. Yeah, I think so. Do we have any other questions or comments on the boards and or for Chris while he is on the call?
So you're bringing your own sticky notes, right?
I will bring sticky notes, pens, easels. I'll print out these boards, have them on
Okay.
hardback foam core, markers. I think that's probably it. I'll have the presentation on a thumb drive as well as the computer. I think it sounds like there is a microphone here. There will be, I assume, a projector here for folks to see the
Yes.
presentation.
And I also suggested a registration table so that folks coming in can leave their name and their email address for the next public workshop, so they can keep in touch.
Yep.
And will there be other members of your team in attendance?
No, I don't think it's necessary to bring anyone else. I had considered it, but I think, I don't know what, there's really not gonna be much value in having that. I have staff that have helped me behind the scenes. Is that something you want? Is that why you're bringing that up?
I'm just asking. I
Yeah.
hadn't heard.
No, I don't think, just from a budget perspective, I don't think it adds enough value, especially given that I know that there will be at least several of you on hand to help with the facilitation of the boards.
And we'll have a microphone for you at the podium here, but then if the public has questions, we'll have to turn that mic into the audience. So just so you're aware of that, we're down to one mic, so.
Yeah, that's a good thing. Like, before we go, Matt, let's just talk about that real briefly. My suggestion would be that we don't have general audience questions at the end of the presentation, that we just move directly into the open house, and people can ask their questions individually and in small groups that way. The reason for that is I find that they often get sort of hijacked because of certain people that want to get on their soapbox and speak, and often it doesn't respect other people's time. I think if this group feels like you have to have or really do want to allow questions, then I would say we really set a limit on that for some small amount of time or discrete amount of time before moving to the open house.
So that's a good point. We have a lot of opinions in this village that need to be heard, and and everybody will be heard. It's just a matter of the approach and the process and when that happens. It's all about timing. So in your mind, Chris, this public forum, it's not designed, if I'm hearing from you correctly, it's not designed to be an open forum. It's to help inform you to refine the draft even further, right?
Well, it's open in the sense that any individual is going to have the opportunity to speak and provide their comments both on the boards and to me, to any of the members here. It's just not being done in a forum of where they're speaking in front of everybody to do it.
Yeah.
It's also it's helpful because some people are frankly don't like to speak up, but they have really good ideas. And so this way, by allowing that, by kind of leveling the playing field that everybody can speak, but you're speaking during the open house forum portion. Usually, I would be kind of floating around and having these conversations, and I would expect if the mayor's attending, that's usually what his role would be as well, to kind of hear those comments on an individual basis. And then any of you all who are at the different stations, hopefully most of the information will be put on the boards, but people will want to talk, and you'll try to jot some notes to capture those as well.
Like it.
Yeah, for the meeting, we can do a Zoom recording of your introductory remarks, but we won't be able to capture anything beyond that
I
when
think
we
it's
go to
just-
the open house, so.
Yep.
I just think it's a good idea to record his
Oh,
presentation.
I forget it.
Yeah,
Definitely.
so we'll just have to remember that.
So are we meeting next week to finalize this on Thursday?
So that's where my mind is as we're wrapping these up. My mind is automatically going to let's say the 3rd. So we have the 10th still
We
reserved.
Still have it.
So there's a few things that are kind of batting around. We can definitely use the time for sure. The first and foremost is Chris needs to get some of the revisions talked about today. Whenever he feels comfortable turning those around, we can either review them in email Or we can set some time aside in the very beginning of next, on the 10th to go through anything one last time. I don't know if it makes sense to do that, Chris, or we can do it offline, like asynchronously through email and any updates, or
I mean, I'm gonna
let's
send
tackle
this,
that piece first.
I will have this, like I said, I don't know if it would be tomorrow, but it would be by Monday. I mean, I feel like these were very clear changes that I'm
so
making,
I
that
think
I
they're very
don't
minor
think that you
changes
need to spend the time, rehashing it in person again, but that's your prerogative.
I don't think so. Yeah. Is anyone else?
Now,
Okay. All right, so I think we're good there then for the 10th. So what we'll do then for the 10th then is talk about, so some of the topics that I asked folks. I want to take a very, I want to take an approach. I want to make sure we agree to a process because there is so many topics and I'm seeing how many topics we're going to spend a lot of time together, right? So let's make sure that time counts. So I want to make sure as a group, we stack rank them. And we agree to like, these two topics are one meeting, this topic's another meeting, and we have kind of like an agenda for each meeting, right? The last thing I want to do is set us up for failure. And next thing you know, we're in a kindergarten cafeteria having a food fight. So that's not what I want. So we'll go at it with like this topic this day, this topic this day. And then Chris, we will keep you abreast on some of those things. And we'll go through I'm thinking we kind of have to hone in on each topic. I don't even care what topic it could be, because we haven't talked about any topics yet.
that's right.
Which haven't talked about anything, because this is priority, this is critical path to get through the public forum, because Chris is gonna take that information, bake it in the draft. Our jobs are gonna go through each of these topics, and my thought is, we could talk about this on the 10th, but I've been thinking out loud a little bit is, we talk about a concept, we talk about in principle, we get the idea, we don't look at the draft of first draft, because that first draft that's exactly what it is, it's not. Some areas is close, some areas it's not close, some areas it's like, wait a minute, what? So we take as a concept what we want to talk about, and then we kind of whittle that down, and if there's anything in the zoning, then we can kind of call that out. But we don't touch the draft first, we talk about what we want to do first, each concept, and then we hand that over to Chris to kind of bake it to the next iteration of the draft. Because if we start getting into the weeds on the draft, if we reflexively go into that document, we're not talking about the concept as a whole, and we're gonna get lost down a rabbit hole, and I'm gonna go, guys, let's back up, let's get back on target, we're wasting 80% of the meeting, we have another topic to talk about, so that's where my mind's gonna go. But anyway, I was just thinking out loud a little bit about how we have to kind of crawl, walk, and then run, so I think we start with that list, I think we have a good list. Now we can't, so here's another thing, is the more we add to it, the more lower priority, more weedy, more detail oriented ones, and then we're gonna be here until April. And we're gonna have to meet more than twice a month, and I don't know if anybody wants to see my face all that often, but like, I don't think we wanna do that, we wanna stick on the conceptual level, get agreement in principle, give it to Chris. Cause we agreed that Chris is gonna control the language and write the draft, and then we move on to each topic, and that's how we advise.
We advise on the language that we find problematic.
Yeah, sure, we can absolutely go in there, and if we wanna pull something out, but that's gonna be a slippery slope, I think we all have to check ourselves and watch each other on, because once we get a document, we're gonna miss the concept, and we're gonna have to go down and dot i's, cross t's, we will get there. There's no doubt in my mind, invariably we'll get to that language, but we need to start the concepts first, and then kind of devolve into that stuff, and that's where, at the end, that's where kind of Chris will start coming into play of like, wordsmithing it and things like that.
So I strongly agree with your approach, and I think I'm glad,
This is just
glad
feedback.
I'm really glad that you came forward with that, because I feel like we've been really missing those discussions. So
We're
the one
missing, because we have
Oh,
other
yeah.
things we need to do first to get, because we can't have, like I said, cafeteria food fight, we can't just all of a sudden start with PDDs. Or start with signs, but we've got other things as a committee we have to deal with first, so that's like, anyway.
And I think your list is great. The only thing I think it's missing, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, you probably pulled a lot of that from the things that there were a lot of comments on.
This is my mind,
Yeah.
and then I started asking folks like, hey, what else is in the list?
The only thing that I think we're missing in there is the parts that aren't in the draft right now, which is the actual zoning itself. And obviously there are things that are technical in there that we're not gonna have much to say about, but I think there are important things that we should discuss. Like, we're not gonna talk about like numbers for setbacks and stuff, but I think we should talk about the purpose of things like that. So if we're deciding between aesthetic versus safety reasons for decisions and how much we're going to prioritize one over the other and things like that. I think there are just a couple of things in like the actual meat of the zoning that we could talk about. Well, I think that's because I think we didn't go through that section yet. There might be things that are a big question that are topics that aren't in that list because we haven't really dug into that part.
So we'll iterate on. So I know Chris owes us a version 2 of some of the placeholder stuff that he hasn't gone to yet. We'll do a rinse and repeat the same thing. Once we see more language, we'll just add more topics and conceptualize them. And then kind of pros and cons. Here we are, Chris. This is our feedback and keep iterating.
Yeah,
That's a good point.
I think the priority should be on those breakout group discussions and what we all develop some consensus on. That is good.
What do you mean priority?
Well,
So, I have to drop off. Was there anything else you needed from me? This sounds like a,
No, we're good, Chris. I
Okay.
appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank
All right.
you.
bye-bye.
Bye.
we all got assigned into little breakout groups, so we've had those discussions. So that discussion and whatever consensus we develop should come to the forefront.
And hopefully
Initially.
that helps to guide the conversations when we actually.
Yeah.
That was hopefully the intent of those little kind of informational, educational. Yeah,
Because
Okay.
we actually never finished land use.
No.
Yeah,
We never did.
yeah.
yeah.
It's just so much.
And there are many other topics that weren't doled out to the zoning advisory.
So
committee,
let me also just kind of get a gut check here. I know our timeline and our schedule goes to the end of the year. Based on the amount of topics, we are not even going, okay, good. We got some consensus that we're not, okay, good.
Yeah, I've already reserved the room
I was gonna ask about.
125 and I'll continue to do
Can you
that.
give me those dates so I can update the general?
Not into 2026.
Do that. As soon as we get it, I'll do it like I did last time, but I.
Yeah, just send me the
continue to
dates.
go Through,
And I'll update.
as long as you still want to do it on the first and third Thursday
I mean,
of each month.
Yeah.
Might as well. Me, because we have to grind through this. All right, so more to come on those like stack ranking and talking about how we're gonna approach this stuff next time on the 10th. And then we'll reserve the first part if we do have any feedback. Reports. And that's my processes. Last topic, last agenda item was public comments. Anyone on Zoom, Jen, or anyone in the crowd like to say anything?
Hold on, yes, I have someone.
Okay.
Hold on, there we go. I have someone. Liz would like to say something. Allowed to talk.
Can you hear
Liz,
me
can you
now?
hear- There you go.
Okay, one thought, you, in this, public session are, dealing in some detail with the central business district, the transition zones, the business area. Yet on the map, the proposed map, you have a lot of different residential districts. And I know those are based on that the neighborhoods are different, but where are you going to get the input from people, hopefully that live in those districts, about some of, what will be allowed or not allowed in those? Because, the district I live in has apartments, multifamily, businesses, and it's zoned single family. So I think in the session, you should somehow, raise that question. Does that district, are they going to allow those things, or are they going to continue to be, non-conforming zoning? Thank you. Liz Cormos, 89 Hyde.
Thanks, Liz.
She beat Jen to it. Okay, any other comments on Zoom, Jen?
Nope, she was the only one on Zoom.
That is a good point. Residential districts. Sorry.
I quickly, because I was online earlier, when I came in, I was looking at the map and I saw that there were some changes, and it seemed like in the business district, there was different colors, depends on where you were. And I didn't see any like specifics on where you're at and where you're located and why you are in different business districts. And I didn't see kind of what she brought up, about the residential. I didn't see it, but maybe I couldn't see it, so I was on my phone, and couldn't load up enough. So I think that would just be a little bit more specific. The other thing that he talked about was the AUDs. I was looking at that, he was just going over that. I guess I just had some questions about it, like I know, someone in our neighborhood just did one for a family member because of, they needed it. So I understand that, and then I guess moving forward, are other people gonna be allowed that? There was another person in the neighborhood that just got passed
Big problem.
an apartment in the,
What's not
and it just is concerning to see some of that when you are in it. Not that I'm not against apartments, I also feel like, you have to use your land wisely. And so I get the pros and cons, and then as a business owner, when you buy a property and I want to maybe improve upon it, it's looking at like the Grand Union spot that you guys were talking about and seeing all the requirements. I'm thinking, just off the top of my head, a concern would be if a small business owner went to buy property to spend a lot of money, not that they wouldn't want to improve and follow all the rules, but it can be like, oh, we're only allowed to plant this type of tree, or you're only allowed to, it can be a little bit micromanaging. And I think that's something that needs to be aware of if we want to be like, hey, O'Reilly's or some Fortune 500 company come in and buy it, that's no big deal for them in comparison to like most of our downtown is owned by local people, small business owners. So I just think that's the mindset of what you need to think about, what you want the purpose for, if you want it to be like in Malta or more like downtown, the village is right now. That's just my thoughts.
Thank you.
And thank you for your time. I appreciate it, all the work you guys do.
Okay. If not anyone else, we can conclude the meeting. All right, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Jen, we appreciate it.
No problem, guys. Have a good night.